Hey, it's Aunt Fanny, and we're here to talk about homeschool field trips that cost nothing. Here's my little one, Adeline. So we are a family that started homeschool last year. We homeschool a 4 and a 6-year-old. So we have done now pre-K 4 and first grade. And we learned so much in that first year. Before I started the homeschool, I felt like I almost had analysis paralysis with going through all of the decision making of what curriculum, how am I going to implement different things, how am I going to bring in additional studies and socialization and all that kind of stuff. And it got to the point where I almost just bailed on the whole idea of homeschooling. But then I just said, you know what, this is so important. I got to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to dive in and do it. And that's what we chose to do. We chose a curriculum. We thought, you know what, if we do it for a year and we don't like it, we'll choose another one next year. And this first year has really been amazing at learning so much about our kids, learning about our abilities with homeschool, and finding really new and creative ideas of what to do with our kids in the homeschool atmosphere. So today we're going to talk about free field trips that we have done, we've discovered, we've heard other moms talk about, and it's really an endless list, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So we're going to start with about 15 of them. So obviously, number one thing is the park. Great field trip, right? But amp it up a little bit. When you go to the park, turn it into a bit of a science and discovery trip. So we don't call our days that we go out into the world and do like field trips, we call it discovery days, because we want to keep that attitude of discovery and learning continuing and going on those days. It's not just a day we go to the park and go play. Some of the local parks will have an app associated with your park, and there'll be a sign there at your park. You download the app and it'll incorporate little busy games for the kids to run and get little characters and bring them back to you and then secure them, and it incorporates 3D stuff with your phone. It's really cool. It gets them moving, going back and forth. It gets them exploring different parts of the park that you maybe they wouldn't be going to. They might just stick with the swings and the slides, but it's going to have them going underneath and in between and up and around, and it's pretty cool. And then you can also use those apps at parks that don't have the signage. It's just a little less direct focus. You're not going to actually be going after a character that's actually hidden on the equipment, but it's very fun. And I'll try to list at least the one app that we've used. So then again, really basic one, go for a hike, right? Take your family out, get some good shoes, get your sunblock, and go for a hike. Find a really cool location. I mean, you're not going to be taking like these 5-mile hikes with these little guys, but adjust it to whatever the capabilities of your kids are. And again, I encourage you to do things that bring it to the next level if it's not just a PE credit. If you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or even GPS or something on your phone, track it, track the trail, review it later when you get home. Discuss how many miles do you think that we walked? How much elevation do you think that we went up and down? If your app can give you this kind of feedback, use it. Let the kids know, well, this is how much elevation we went up and down today. This is the path that we took. This is how many miles that we walked, things like that. Also, explore the geology as well as the geography. If there's interesting formations, if there's rocks, if there's caverns or ravines or rivers and streams, talk about that. Talk about the environment. Talk about where the water comes from, that it comes from the snow melt, that it comes down and then it all drains into the larger rivers and eventually goes to the ocean. Talk about the water cycle. Incorporate all of these really great topics on something as basic as a hike. Okay, number 3 is a nature center. Now, I don't know what all you have available in your area, but here in Idaho, we have a place called MK Nature Center. The free part of the nature center is the entire acreage is just free to walk about. There's creeks and there's ponds and there's animal, there's deer that'll be bed down in there. They have interactive displays. In our particular one, we have sturgeon in some of our rivers here, and they can live up to be like 100 years old, and they just look like they're dinosaurs. They do have a couple of those sturgeon in those ponds, and so if you catch it at the right time, you can actually see one, whatever kind of stuff. Here in Idaho, it's illegal. You cannot take a sturgeon out of the water. So it's really neat that you can go to a place and actually see them in their habitat, just floating around doing their thing. So that's pretty neat experience. And there's just so much to do there. So if you have some sort of nature center, I encourage you to seek it out and see if there's a free section of that, because there's just endless possibilities to learn. You could go back several times and I don't think ever really fully discuss all the things that are there, and to see all the things that are there. Number 4 is a food bank. So a food bank is such an excellent opportunity for your kids to learn about their community, what the community does for other community members, what the needs are, what goes into serving others, opening their mind to things that maybe that they're not seeing in their own environments or their neighborhoods or in their community. of what the needs are of others, giving them that opportunity to serve, and that it's not just food. Sometimes it's clothing, or it's bedding, or it's furniture, or it's teaching people how to manage their money well. We have a wonderful program here that I think is nationwide. It's called Love Inc., Love in the Name of Christ. And not only do they offer a food bank, but they offer ways for people to get furnishings for their homes if they're in need of any of those things. And they also do teach like the Dave Ramsey type approach of financial well-being. All of these things are just amazing ways for kids to just expand what their immediate environment may be. Number 5 is canoeing, paddle boarding, or going to a lake or to the river. You can talk about the currents. Again, where does the water come from? Where does the water go? What is the water cycle? It's a great PE credit to go out there and go canoeing or kayaking or paddleboarding. Spending time swimming. Talk about what lives in the lake. What about algae? What about algae blooms? What do the fish feed off of? Talk about fishing. Talk about all that kind of stuff. Maybe even do some fishing. Talk about resourcefulness and self-reliance. There's so many endless conversations that you could have in dealing with being around any type of water source. Number 6 is Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is more of like a fun outing. They have the little kid carts. If you have littler kids, they tend to really love being able to push their own carts around. You think, well, what is the lesson there? Well, the lesson there is math. It's math, it's supply and demand, it's inventory, it's all those kind of things depending on the age of your kids. So as you go through and you pick out certain things, or you give them so much money, you say, here's $10, and what do you want to buy with your $10? And if they want to buy some Cheeto Puffs and a yogurt, are they going to go over, and so on and so forth. So Trader Joe's, I think, is a fun, because it really caters to the little kids. And then at the end, if they find the Huckleberry there, you can get a free sucker at the checkout. So that's always fun. Number 7 is a farmer's market. This is just a wealth of information, because a farmer's market usually has so much variety. Anything from pasture-raised meats, homegrown vegetables, homegrown flowers, soaps, lotions, all sorts of different multi-level marketing stuff. There's just so much to be learning about the different vegetables. You can talk about what the different vegetables are. Maybe it's not stuff that you regularly eat in your house, and so you want to talk about what an eggplant is, or how to eat parts of a cactus, or whatever it is that's there. And the people that are doing these displays and marketing their products, a lot of them are going to be really interested to explain this stuff to your kids, because their heart generally is to create a heart of another farmer, another producer, right? So if your kids have questions, ask them, when they're not busy or whatever, just ask the people at their stand. There's so much to be learned there about so many different things. Number 8 is go to an old cemetery. Now, of course, you can go to a current cemetery and you can learn a lot. But if you go to the old ones, you get to tie in history. You get to tie in the settlement of your region. You can tie in pioneers. You can tie in, depending on where you're at, you can tie in the Revolutionary War, Civil Wars. There's so much stuff just by finding these old headstones and talking about how old were the people when they passed. When did they pass? What was happening in their world when they were born? What was happening in the world when they passed? What do we think might have happened? What would have been the challenges in their life while they were alive? What are some of the things that they may have overcome? How do you think that they lived? Do you think that they had indoor plumbing? Do you think that they had, internet? Just basic things like that. Just really just go deeper and let kids understand that the world hasn't always existed as it does today. Number 9, and I talked about this on the fee things, is caves and caverns. So obviously there are caves and caverns that you're going to have to pay for to go, but there's plenty of them out there that are safe and free. So we have one called the Cuna Caves. It is free to go down into. You used to be able to go back a lot further into them than you can now, but nonetheless, it's still an excellent cave. You can talk about lava tubes, the creation of these caves, any type of geology that you may see. You can talk about taking care of our earth. There's lots of times that you can go to a cave or a cavern and find that it is not very well maintained, that people have gone down there and abused them, neglected them. Talk to your kids about littering, ensuring that whatever we pack in, we pack out. Make sure that we're doing right by our environment that we live in. So lots of things like that. But the number one thing is safety, obviously. Don't just go exploring just any cave. There could be some sort of wildlife living in it, or it could be an unsafe cave. So make sure that it's something that's well known, that people tour, and take that chance to go do something a little bit different than maybe you might normally do. Number 10, if you have older kids, take them to the courthouse during a trial. It's a very interesting way for them to learn about crime, law, the judicial system, the setup of a courtroom, how it all works, how the witnesses are presented, how the judge interacts with all the different things. There's just a wealth of information to be learned from just sitting and witnessing an actual court trial. And obviously, whichever one you choose is going to be something that's going to be age appropriate. You probably are not going to want to take a 12-year-old to something that is a capital charge or something like that, where you're not going to want to witness that. But even the idea of sitting down and just going through where people are just coming in, and you're just going down the docket, and you're just pulling up name after name after name, and each person that has misdemeanors or different things goes through, and they talk about what the charges are, and they plead their case, and perhaps they get sentenced at that time. But it's an excellent opportunity to bring up and talk about drugs. It's an excellent opportunity to talk about violence. It's an excellent opportunity to talk about honesty and ethics and morals and all that different stuff. So I think you can come away with that, albeit being age appropriate, with excellent conversations with your kids. The next one I would say is kind of ties into the farmer's market a little bit, but it's different, is number 11 would be a greenhouse. If you have a local greenhouse, or even where it's a retail store, walk them through it. Let them know. Go to the seed section. Go to the starts section. Let them know the life cycle of a plant. Talk to them about the different parts of plants, with them being able to actually see all the different variations, the different leaf structures, the heights and the needs of plants that vary throughout all of it. Check out a greenhouse. Number 12 is go one step further. Help at a garden. If you have a family member or a neighbor or somebody that is planting a garden or is maintaining a garden, have your kids spend a day, couple hours over helping to weed that garden, to plant that garden, to harvest that garden. And that person, if they're really knowledgeable in what they're doing, or at least passionate about what they're doing, they can have excellent conversations about how to do it, the seasons, where to plant, how to make their beds for their backyard garden, when do they harvest, why do they harvest, what do they use the harvest for, like what do they do with 60 pounds of tomatoes, what do they do with all the strawberries, and how do they keep the raspberries under control, all sorts of things like that. There's excellent ways to have some really great conversations there. And then number 13 is similar to that as well. Go to a farm. Here, sitting in front of my father-in-law's John Deere tractor. Go to a farm, see how it works. Check out the animals. Talk about, again, age-appropriate breeding cycles. How long is each animal pregnant? How many babies does each animal on average give birth to? Compare a litter of kittens to a goat having one or two, or a cow just having one calf. And how long does that take? And then what happens in the life cycle of that animal? How do they get fed? What do they get fed? What's important type of veterinary medicine? What are the things that they have to watch out for? There's so much information that can be learned on a farm. Have them do the chores for a day on somebody's farm. Excellent way to instill work ethics, all sorts of just really good stuff. Number 14, are you reading a book to your kids? Are you reading them Little House on the Prairie? How close are you to Missouri? How close are you to Minnesota? How close are you to the southeast corner of Kansas? In the Little House on the Prairie books, depending on which part you're at, those areas of the United States are talked about. When they first come west, they end up in Kansas on the river there. And then they end up in Minnesota, and then they're in Missouri at some point in the book. Whatever books that you're reading, like we like to read the Rush Revere books by Rush Limbaugh. There ties everything back to the Revolutionary War. It ties everything back to the Mayflower. It ties things back to walking around Boston. So are we close to Boston? No. Are we close to any of those places talked about in the stories? No. But someday we could travel there because we have our RV. We could travel there, and then we can pull those books back out and say, remember when the kids in the story went to this place? This is what they're talking about. This is the North Church. This is where they put the lanterns in the window. This is where Paul Revere took his ride. There's just so many different things that you can bring to life from stories, especially things from a nonfiction story, but even fictional stories like the Rush Revere stuff. There's facts tied into that you can bring to life for those kids. And then number 15, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, camping. Just getting out into the wilderness, into the trees, into the desert, up by a lake, up by the river, boondocking somewhere, BLM land, whatever it is, go camping. And don't just hole up at your camp. Go for a walk, go for a swim, go for an exploration day. And, of course, keeping yourself safe. Get your sunscreen. If there's bears in the area, get your bear spray, all that kind of stuff. But just go and explore the areas in which you're camping. check out the geography, the geology. Again, utilize those apps for how far you're walking and what the elevation difference is, what the trail is that you actually took with your kids. Talk about the animals that might live up there. Talk about the effects on the environment for people that actually camp and maybe aren't respectful of the area. So many different things. So I'd love to hear your ideas of other free field trip or discovery days that you do with your homeschoolers or that you'd like to do with your homeschoolers. Put them in the comments. Again, please like, follow, subscribe, do all the things that you do on all the social medias so that I can keep growing this channel. This is something I'm really passionate about. So let's go through this journey together. I'm super excited about it. And I hope that you're excited to learn and to share this with me.